Greetings, dear people of God at Trinity and beloved friends beyond. Thank you for joining me for this week's Reflections from the Other Side. I've missed you. Do you remember where you were when Russia invaded Ukraine under the flimsy guise of ridding this democratic country of Nazis? It was, after all, only in February of this year. Has your attention to the latest news from the battlefront faded a bit, a lot, as that unjust war drags on? It's easy to happen. I want to give you another image to consider when you think about Ukraine. The passing of the peace that is so familiar among those who attend Trinity and thousands of other churches. I realize that this image of peace among new friends and even strangers must seem discordant with the very notion of war. But to explain more, I need to tell you about my trip to Poland. If you are thinking, how could Franny travel to Poland? That's just too much. Well, you're in good company. That is what my husband Michael thought as well, and honestly, he and you would be right. It was a bit much for my still recovering self, but nevertheless, I persisted, and I'm so glad I did. For truly, I spent the whole of last week falling in love, and we don't even speak the same language. I'm talking about the Women of Love Rises, our newest justice enterprise at Thistle Farms Global Shared Trade. The women are Ukrainian refugees who, in the face of the Roman invasion in February, had to leave their lives with only the clothes on their backs, leave not only their homes and possessions, but their work as teachers, as store owners, as communications experts, and government employees, to seek safety from the violent attacks of the Russian invaders. Some of the women who had attended peaceful protests were even placed on Russian hit lists, all the more reason to escape for their lives. They found shelter still inside Ukraine, some with family members, others in apartments, but all isolated from their homes and their communities. Although some await news of their loved ones who are actually fighting, all are constantly concerned about the fighters and actively volunteering to support all those in the war through sending supplies as well as prayers. With the fighters constantly on their minds, they are all constantly on the verge of tears. But how did I come to meet them and learn their stories? That is what Thistle Farms Global Shared Trade does when we start a new enterprise, wherever it is in the world. We show up. We go to them across oceans if need be, and we meet them and listen to their stories, and we offer them our love through helping them to create an enterprise, selling products that they have made by posting those products online on the Thistle Farms website. The women with whom we partner around the world derive an income from the sales. But it's not only the income that these women receive, it's our consistent, constant support, the relationship of trust that we build together. So that, for example, the Ukrainian women can persevere when they return home and keep on creating their products, keep on knitting, despite being overwhelmed by the challenges of war. And what products are the women creating? Knitted socks and blankets. What they have in common, besides being Ukrainian and refugees, is that they are all expert knitters. You should see what they have already created for themselves, shawls and sweaters and even hats. When Luda, one of the women, had to close down her shop and escape for her life, she was the one who brought only her bag of knitting needles with her. Now for our enterprise, Luda and the others are creating warm and comfy knitted socks in blue and yellow, the colors of the Ukrainian flag, and gorgeous, colorful, soft blankets with names like Oasis Rose and Daybreak to be used to softly warm the wearer. They may have knitting in common, but these women did not know each other well at all when we first gathered together with them in Stargard, Poland, the village chosen by Joanna, one of the organizers, because of her connections there with the Ukrainian refugee community. We arrived last Tuesday from Nashville in California, and the women arrived by train from across the border in Ukraine. Luda came from as far as Vienna to meet together, all of us, for 5 days. We did have a translator during our days together as the women knitted, using the new yarns we had sent for them, while those of us who are not even close to being knitters rolled countless balls of yarn for them. But there was so much more communicated than the words spoken between us, through body language, through hugs and hands on hearts and tender looks and clapping and laughter and tears and fists and glasses raised cheering for Ukraine, through walking arm in arm and yes, through dancing. We shared with one another our loving support and determination to stay connected, despite logistical challenges caused by the devastating circumstances of war. By Saturday, our work was done. The yarn that had been shipped to Stargard, where we met, had been packed away in duffels and bags to be carried across the border by the women back to Ukraine. The women had been trained to use the new knitting machines for the blankets, and plans for shipping the finished blankets and socks had been made. The org chart had been shared and details worked out. But something had happened that involved more than the details for the enterprise as a business. It was the planting of seeds of love that would support and sustain the women in their work back in their lives in Ukraine as they knitted away. The first night we had exchanged tentative and careful hugs and handshakes, watching each other shyly. But as the days unfolded, that changed. We melted as the women shared their stories, and we all wept together. And we began to feel a bond, and not only to cry, but to laugh together as we worked. And as we visited the warehouses where supplies for the Ukrainian people are gathered and trucked into Ukraine. And as we joined a celebration of Ukrainian Independence Day at the local Ukrainian church, as we watched the children dancing and singing, and we clapped along and ate large helpings of delicious homemade cake. And when we departed and bid each other goodbye, we fell into each other's arms and wept tears of joy, but also of sadness at our parting. There were no more shy looks from afar. We looked into each other's eyes and we held each other's faces and we kissed one another. We shared the peace, a sharing of the peace that takes what happens between the pews at Trinity to an even deeper level, even more exuberant, more heartfelt, but also more necessary and more needed, a kind of a sharing of the peace that surely shared our love. It was beautiful how much more connected and comfortable we felt with one another, from that beginning tentativeness to comfortable closeness. They now know we are with them through anything that comes, all the way to an actual peace in Ukraine. After all that they have gone through, the women want us all to know that they hope that all good things will come to us in the United States, in the physical form of blankets and socks. Yes, I realize that there is a great physical distance and a literal chasm between their circumstances as refugees in a war zone and our comfortable and safe circumstances in California. But we have a choice. We can either find this distance to be uncomfortable and look away, or from our position of comfort, we can embrace the distance and step firmly into the gap, using the symbolic blankets and socks to connect us just a bit with Ukraine and the women. New relationships that form the foundation for a new sharing of the peace. I promised the women, Marina, Tanya, Luda, Elena, and Irena, I would not forget them, and that I would introduce them to my friends in the United States. I hope that you too will welcome them into your hearts and your home and around your shoulders. Amen.